All right, so now that we have our project created and put on GitHub, I am going to create a test level with ProBuilder so that we can begin, prototyping our third-person character controller. The You'll notice when you first start a project with the universal render pipeline, you get this neat little demo scene, which has some assets you might want to remember exist in case you need them later. Like this light, this work light is super useful. It's in a lot of games. I mean, not this exact model, but this concept is used in a lot of games. I'm sure you've seen something like that. Like it's, for example, in Half-Life Alyx, when you're in the underground sections, they have stuff like this in the sewers or whatever. But anyway, and the other thing that this is useful for is seeing a lighting demonstration. But these are concepts that we don't need to deal with yet. We need something more basic. So I'm just going to make a new scene. And once I have my new scene set up, what we need to do next is add ProBuilder to this project. So ProBuilder is like a modeling tool that is built within Unity, or it exists inside of Unity. So you can use the Unity interface to create, test levels, or really like it's used in a lot of production games too. Like, it's used in Gone Home and some other examples. If you go search, you can find more about it. But the important thing to know with ProBuilder is there's a wrong way to do it, to install it, and a right way. So the wrong way would be to search for ProBuilder in the asset store. It used to be a standalone, a separate paid asset that you had to buy. But Unity acquired ProBuilder and now it's free, and the correct way to get ProBuilder is through the package manager. So you want to go to the window menu and find package manager. And basically, most of the official Unity packages are found through here with some exceptions. But in general, like if you see an option for something in the asset store, but you also see an option in here, you should pick the one in here because it's almost certainly newer. So anyway, we are going to search for ProBuilder, and you'll see we have 4.2.3, and there's some useful links here if you want to look at the documentation, which I'll click, and then I'll hit install. So while it's installing, let's take a look at the documentation these days. This is what that link brought me to. And I don't want to go into too much detail on like how to use ProBuilder in this video at least. But if you've never used it before, it might be a good idea to go through like this getting started and just kind of get an idea of how it works. But I will step you through some of the very, very basics as soon as my import is finished. All right, I think it's done, so I can close the package manager here, and I should be able to go to Window, or maybe it's in Tools. There we go, Tools, ProBuilder, and we want the ProBuilder window. Now, you can use whatever sort of workflow you like, but generally I like to dock mine over here. There is also in icon mode, so you might see screenshots referencing this interface of ProBuilder. I can see how this is better, but I don't have these icons memorized, so I normally just use text mode. But I encourage you to use the workflow that works for you. So let's make a new shape, and that will bring up this thing. Well, it just made a cube. Actually, I'll show you a different thing to do. If you hit the plus button, it'll bring up this thing called the shape tool, which the cool thing here to check out on your own time, I'm sure we'll revisit it when we make our test level a little fancier, like they have doors and stairs and things like that that are really handy. But anyway, you can customize your your shape before you build it, which right now it doesn't really exist. If I close that, the shape goes away. But when I hit build, now I have this ProBuilder cube in my scene. Now, ProBuilder cube is different than a regular Unity cube. It has a couple of key differences, but probably the most important of which is I can modify its geometry. So once you have the ProBuilder window open, you'll notice these little tools here. And the big ones we'll use right now are object selection. This is just what you're used to in Unity, where you can move the handles and just change the position and orientation of your objects. Then there's face selection, which allows you to kind of do the same thing to faces. So that's the gist of ProBuilder. If you're not using a mouse, I really highly recommend you get a mouse for this. Now I do kind of I'm noticing normally in ProBuilder you have a nifty little texture, which is really useful because it has meter increments, and for some reason I don't see that, which is really throwing me off. So I might try pausing the video and reopening Unity and see if that fixes it, but that's pretty odd, and it's a bummer if it's not working right, and I'll have to figure out why. So I guess before I restart, we'll just go ahead and save this scene. So I'll go to File, Save As, and we have a scenes folder already because of that sample scene. So I'm going to call this one Test Level, and I'm going to save it inside of my scenes directory that Unity already made for me. And so we'll hit Save, and then I will close Unity, and I'll pause the video and reopen it once Unity's back, and we'll see what's going on. All right, so I've discovered what the problem is. I forgot about this. So the scriptable render pipelines they use different materials than the regular old Unity 3D project template. And so since we use the universal render pipeline, we have to import the universal render pipeline materials for ProBuilder, which is why the good material isn't showing up, because we don't have it imported. So just to remind you how to find that, we go to Window, we go to Package Manager, and then you can see the Universal Render Pipeline Support option here, and you hit Import into Project. So sorry about that, I forgot that step. You do not need to close and reopen Unity. That is something I did that I didn't need to. Now I wonder what I need to do to get this to look correct, because it still doesn't. Maybe delete it and make a new object. Let's try that. So we'll go to, let's just hit New Shape. Oh yeah, I can already see it worked. So you can see now we have the 1 meter gray box material on our cube, which is nice. So I'm going to put my cube at the origin 0, 0, 0, and I will double click it in the hierarchy to move my scene camera back to it. And there's a lot of ways we could do this. Like we could make a plane, or we could stretch this into a proper floor. So rather than, if I wanted to make a plane, I could go in here and choose plane. But rather than do that, I'm going to use this opportunity to show you a little bit about how the face tool works here. So by default, since I put my cube on 0, 0, 0, you'll see it's lined up with our grid. And our grid is 1 meter by default. And you can see like the material is telling me this cube is 1 meter. Here it is on 1 meter space. This is really, really important. And the more we work and the bigger our levels get, the more vital it is and essential that we build things on the grid. So there used to be, the same company that made ProBuilder also makes a thing, and you can find in the package manager, called ProGrids. which you might have to check show preview packages to get to show up. Anyway, you can look at it here and learn more about it. However, it seems to me that Unity is trying to build this functionality directly into the editor now that they've acquired this company. So I don't think we'll need to add ProGrids. This is still, to be honest with you, this is something I'm still trying to sort out. So it's unclear to me whether ProGrids is better than this new grid system they've put in Unity or not. And so we'll try using the built-in one, and if it emerges that it's frustrating, we could try this one out. And you can click the documentation and kind of see how ProGrids works, but I'm going to skip it for now. Just want to make you aware of this. So we need to make like a big play space to test in. I'm going to hold so I've got my face tool, and then I'm going to hold the control button, which by default is how we snap to the grid. And you'll notice it's snapping, and it looks like maybe 1/4 of a meter increments. And sometimes that's good, but right now I think that's actually a little too fine and granular. I'd like for this, I know this needs to be big, so I just want 1 meter snap increments. So to adjust my snap settings, I'm going to go to the edit menu, and I'm going to choose grid and snap settings. And so here's where I could change this to move a full meter if I wanted. So if I make that 1, and now again holding the control key, if I drag the move handle, you'll see it goes, ooh. Well, it seemed like it was gonna work. Yeah, this doesn't seem to work so good though. So this is maybe ammo that we need to get ProGrids back going. You can see like it moves correctly, but then if I want to move it back, I don't know, I'm not sold on this. So you know what? I'm going to go ahead and get ProGrids. I don't know. That's disappointing. I thought maybe we'd be able to skip that step, but it looks like this feature is not quite so good. Like you see right here, like why is it not? It's just not doing anything. All right, so we learned that lesson the hard way. Sorry. Let's go to the package manager. We want to find ProGrids, and remember, I believe you have to have show preview packages here if you want this to work. Otherwise it won't show up. So once I have ProGrids, I hit install. All right, so mine is finished. I'll close the package manager, and you'll see it added like all this stuff here. Now at this point we have 2 grid systems going. So I need to turn this one off. This is the built-in one that I was hoping I could get away with using, but it doesn't seem to work correctly with ProBuilder yet. Now we need to turn this one on. So this little button turns it on. This is like we can decide which grid plane is rendering, and normally I want it to be on the Y plane, like the floor. But it just depends on what you're working on. You might want to change that. All right, so with ProGrids, the way this one works is we aren't going to even have to hold the control key. We just turn snapping on and start dragging, and it will, you see now this one works. So toggling snapping on and off is handled right here. And if we want to change the snap increment, we could type in a new number here. So right now it's at 1 meter, which is actually what I want. If I wanted to go back to 0.25 like it was when with the default Unity grid, I could make that change, and you see it's much more granular now. And you actually see the grid lines reflect this change too, which is another element I think is better than the built-in grids. Anyway, so the hotkey to change the grid size is plus and minus. So if I hit the plus key, it'll double my grid size. So it went from 0.25 to 0.5. And if I hit minus, it cuts it in half. So it goes from 0.5 back down to 0.25. So by using these hotkeys, we can quickly like ramp up and down, but still be on a grid that will be compatible with bigger sizes. So it's a really good practice to not just put in random numbers in here, but stay in these default multiples of, multiplying it by 2 or reducing it by half by using plus and minus. So I want to go back to the 0.25 grid size, get this down so that this right here looks to be, I want to get my cube to be like, there we go. Now it's 3 meters, right? So now that it's just in increments of 1 meter, I'll go ahead and change my grid size back to 1. And so you want it to look like it lines up on the grid. If you're not sure, you can hit this snap to grid thing, and if it's not on the grid, like if I toggle snapping off and it was like something like that, and then I hit snap to grid, it will go back. So I'll turn snapping back on, and I'm on my 1 meter, and I'm going to zoom my scene camera out and maybe make a floor. So this is 10 meters, like the thicker grid lines. So let's maybe make my floor like, I don't know, 20 by 20, something like that. And again, like normally I might use a plane or something different, but this is a good exercise to get more familiar with the way ProBuilder works, where we can use the face tool and then pick a face and extend it. This is our 20 by 20 floor that we can use. And that's really all the further I want to go with our test level for now. Eventually we'll add a lot more complexity to this, but for now let's just rename this cube to floor, and that should be good. So before I forget, I want to make sure I go to object select mode again. This is like a really common bug. You'll be on face select and you'll try to do something and it won't work right. So I don't know, it's like, let's say I go to the camera here and I want to move my camera, and I have my move tool selected, and I'm like, where's the handles to move the camera? I don't get it. What's going on? It's because I forgot to move back to object selection. So the camera doesn't have any faces, so it just doesn't work when you have it on any of these options that aren't object selection. So that is a common gotcha with ProBuilder. So just be aware if you don't see the move handles or the rotate handles, double check you're actually on object selection. Okay, so I'm going to save my test scene here, and I'm going to go to GitHub, or GitHub desktop rather, and we should see an overview of all of the changes that we've made. Many of these are from importing ProBuilder and ProGrids. It probably would have been good practice to make like one commit that adds ProBuilder, and then make one commit that adds ProGrids, and then fix up my test level. So I guess if I wanted to carefully go through and uncheck the things so that I only had the things selected that had to do with ProBuilder, and then make a commit, and then had to do with ProGrids and make a commit, I could kind of retroactively set my commits up like that. But I think at this point the ship kind of sailed, and so I'm just going to say adds ProBuilder, ProGrids, and simple test scene. Okay. And, you know, just give your project changed files here a look over and make sure nothing seems crazy. If you see something you don't understand, it's a good idea to double check it. But these are correct, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit commit to master. And normally when I'm not importing a bunch of packages, it'll be a lot easier to understand what I changed, which is why I would rather have broken those commits up into smaller pieces like I mentioned, but that's okay. And I'll hit push origin. So I committed. The next step is to push, which actually sends it up to GitHub in the cloud. Now, if I were to look at the GitHub website, you will see I have another commit right here. And we could click on that and see all the things I changed. But since it's all sort of settings and assets that aren't code or text-based, it's kind of not really useful to look at these. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'm going to stop it here, and I'll see you in the next video.